Good morning and welcome to Talking Point once again this Tuesday morning. I'm glad to be with you. My name is Sean Michael Small, once again here to have the important conversations of the day. Hopefully what I have to say will make some sense because there are a lot of important issues and I do wonder if we overlook some of them. Now, unfortunately, my co-host today, Mr. Keaton Shah, he's unable to join us. He's fallen a little bit under the weather, but hopefully everything is okay. But with me soon should be our usual Tuesday contributor, Mr. Kemuel Pascal. And when he is available, he will join me to continue the discussion. But first, let me kick things off. Let me at first acknowledge that the COVID-19 pandemic and more importantly, our local situation. Again, the trend seems to be going in the right direction. And we can only hope that nothing comes out of another corner of the world that might upend this trend. Because at the budget presentation, at our last budget presentation last year, I pointed out the fact that what has the government, our government, done in order to have anything prepared or at the ready for any sort of shock that might come externally, similar to what happened with the pandemic. At the time thinking the pandemic is probably going to throw us another curveball. I didn't necessarily know that the curveball would have come in the form that it currently is in. And now we're in a situation where the world is facing a different crisis. Now, I did say a couple of times over the last year, look out, look at all of the violence and the unrest, the coup in Myanmar and at least one or two African countries, protests in Colombia, Cuba, etc. These things when the world was going at a good pace before COVID. Poverty was being eradicated, technology was advancing, green initiatives were taken to the forefront, food production was, we've reached the point where a lot of our problems of scarce resources were slowly being eradicated. Now COVID comes, and scarcity, once again, is the order of the day. And now this happens to us. No more so than this, because if we thought that prices were going to reach all-time highs due to COVID, now compounded by the war in Ukraine, we are not entirely sure just where these price raises will stop. One of the interesting things is, and we'll get into some of the economic long-term implications later on in the show, but one of the interesting things is the refugee crisis, which started off relatively small, but now has ballooned into a much greater scenario, which in the short run might be manageable, but in the long run might further compound the strain on the systems of the world. We have a clip with regards to the refugees in Ukraine, the refugee exodus. 2.8 million refugees now, I believe, have left the country. Let's take a look at that clip.
It absolutely doesn't slow down. We still see hundreds of people coming day in, day out. They come here. You might see behind me, you can see them still arriving. Those people are usually, in their vast majority, they are women coming with children. They are elderly people. They are people with disability. They still come in. And I was talking earlier today to a representative of the nearby city of Przemysl to ask him about how the city was coping, and he said the hosting capacity of this city is at around 2,000 people. They are hosted in schools, for example, that have been requisitioned. They are hosted also in warehouses that have been lent by some supermarket chains, but every day they are still along this border in the nearby city of Przemysl, where the people that you see behind me are heading to, because from there they can reach other places in Poland Poland every day. There's still 20,000 people coming. This City Hall representative told me, well, it's less than 2 weeks ago where between February 24th and the beginning of the Russian aggression against Ukraine, there were over 50,000 people crossing daily. So people keep on coming, they keep on trying to reach safety, and it shows absolutely no sign to stop anytime soon.
And what about the Polish government? Is it doing everything it can to welcome these people adequately?
Let's say that it does what it can. It does already a lot. There's a lot of police forces which are here. There's a lot of soldiers that come here at the border. They welcome, for example, elderly people. They carry their luggage. They gave them directions. They explain to them what their 18 months visa is for, their residency permit that they have to stay here because they come from a country at war. There's also firefighters. There's volunteers of all walks of life. There's also a lot of foreign volunteers who come here, foreign NGOs who come here. There's French firefighters, there are Indian volunteers, Chinese volunteers, British volunteers. There's a lot that is being done. The central government back in Warsaw also unblocked a financial aid, a one-time financial aid of 1.6 billion euros last Thursday. Will that be enough, though, to alleviate the situation, this humanitarian crisis? Well, we will only find out in the weeks, the months to come. But there's a lot of people here who are worried because solidarity is here and goodwill is here. But Poland also called on the international community to help because it feels that alone it won't be able to deal with the nearly 2 million people it is now hosting here.
Emmanuel Chaz reporting there from Medyka on the border between Poland and Ukraine.
So that is just one nation's, I guess you could say, the consequences of another nation's aggression. Poland has to now try to figure out what to do with 1.7 million people after having gone through a pandemic, which has affected their economy as it has affected all of our economies. To put that into context, when I believe it was either Germany or United Kingdom had to deal with 600,000 refugees from Syria before the pandemic. Again, when economies were good, when money was flowing and nations had a significant greater amount of leeway and margin for error and reserves and whatnot. Not only that, but their citizens also had the capacity to provide more help on an individual level, on a voluntary level, financially, because financial assistance is key in order to get the resources, whether it's in the form of actual money or particularly food, clothes and shelter, yes, but particularly food and water. Now Poland has to deal with almost 3 times that number. Probably it's going to grow further. Now a lot of Ukrainians seem to be wanting to stand and hold their ground. But this is just one part of what could be a humanitarian crisis. There's another humanitarian crisis, I believe. I'm not sure if it's Mariupol, where that city essentially is running out of food and water as it's surrounded by Russian forces. Why does that matter to us? As we saw in 2008 with regards to the economic situation in Europe, these shocks could translate from country to country in the region, and then from region to region. We depend on trade in order to get a lot of our food, in order to import almost everything we consume. It's an interesting conundrum that the government has now paid lip service with regards to diversification, all the while still banking on oil and gas. And to be fair, the price of oil and gas is high, but as the PM said last week, and it's something that we have put forward here multiple times on Talking Point, that doesn't necessarily mean we will enjoy easy days once again, because our energy industry is not what it was, and the situation is volatile. Okay, so these shocks are going to continue, and they're going to continue to the energy sector globally. They're going to continue with the food sector. Now, Could we have diversified fast enough to deal with this new external shock to our economy? Probably not, to be fair. But we already have not made any significant attempt to even start, to even look into how we could try to make ourselves more independent from these things. The Prime Minister himself said it would be difficult to insulate the population from the rising fuel prices, because the subsidy is just probably going to balloon out of proportion. So as the situation in Europe continues, it draws more resources there, resources which are now more limited. It draws more resources from America. It draws more resources from its neighbors. It's less resources we have to potentially help us. What happens now in a shipping environment where the cost of shipping, and anyone that brings in goods in a local port, in Port of Spain, will know that the cost of just bringing in goods is ridiculously high. We've had Mr. Balaram Maharaj, at least on 2 occasions, if not more, call in just to express what he has faced with the cost of shipping. Shipping the goods costs more than the goods, and clearing it in customs and all of that. Well, what happens now if emergency relief supplies have to go to Europe, particularly if this thing continues to escalate? And ships have to be diverted. There's a whole host of political ramifications. A lot of these ships, a lot of these containers come from Southeast Asia. What happens if politically now trade becomes more difficult with China? And with the diversion of shipping, increasing the price to ship food, which already is experiencing inflationary shocks, we could face further difficulties. Now, you would say, well, the war could end tomorrow. Yes, it could end tomorrow. How likely is it to end tomorrow? I have seen no indication that Russia is looking to back down. And ironically, the economic sanctions, while in the long run, might be very detrimental to Russia. In the short run, it might motivate that nation to continue down its path. It's already going to pay a hell of a price. It needs to get something for its endeavors. But I have another clip I want you to see, which is why I think psychologically, I don't necessarily think this is going to end anytime soon. I have a clip from a Russian journalist that actually attempted to protest on Russian state media. Take a look at this.
What you're about to see is by any standards a moment of extraordinary bravery. The programme quickly cuts away to a recorded sequence, but this image of Marina Ovsyannikova running onto set with a sign urging Russians not to believe the lies being broadcast will be replayed again and again. She's been identified as an editor at Channel One, the state-owned television station whose evening news programme she so unexpectedly interrupted. Before she did so, she recorded this video, wearing a necklace that blends the colours of Russia and Ukraine.
What is happening now in Ukraine is a crime, and the responsibility for it lays with one person alone, and that is Vladimir Putin. For my shame, for the past few years, I've been working on the First Channel, peddling Kremlin propaganda, and I am now truly ashamed of this.
The last thing she says is they can't imprison us all. But it's understood she's already been detained for questioning. The seriousness of her situation now, underlined by the way Russia's riot police have reacted to even the meekest of protests. This woman led away for holding up a blank piece of paper. This sign reading 2 words, enough for its author to be quickly detained. The Kremlin knows it's fighting a war of information too, and with television still the main news source for most Russians, controlling it is a powerful weapon. It's not all one way. This is a state news presenter, Vladimir Solovyov, in a seemingly unscripted broadside, warning the West they're foolish to think Russia will stop at Ukraine.
No pasaran.
New laws mean anyone detracting from the Kremlin's message faces prosecution, with 15 years for the most serious offences. Tonight's remarkable protest will be the biggest test of that censorship so far. Marina Ovsyannikova will have known exactly how much she was risking, and we should remember her name. Rachel Younger, News at 10, Riga.
It's somewhat surreal now sitting in front of a camera, watching someone essentially condemned for doing something, while extremely brave. We're not talking about something complicated. We're talking about something pretty simple: protesting violence, right? It's something that any one of us could do. In fact, you would argue we do it all the time. We lament about our murder rate in TNT. We lament about this country going toward that country. Now, as a media practitioner for a little over a year, I saw where censorship was going in Western democracies, and it worried me. But this is a whole different level, because the escalation, usually you lose liberty one small piece at a slow and steady pace. This is a loss of liberty in a month, 15 years for protesting a war. And people want to compare certain Western democracies with other countries around the world. You can still protest your nation going to war depending on where you live. So, why is this relevant? Well, in the clip there included a small, brief segment of a Russian TV host saying that Ukraine is just in the intermediate stage. Make no mistake. Russia is saying it's a special operation. In fact, they've even banned people, their soldiers and people in the country, from calling it a war. They don't want to acknowledge it's a war. But it's a war that they've set up for several years. Depending on what you believe, the situation with the separatists in the Donbass region was engineered by Russia and facilitated by Russian puppets who they installed. That's basically their game plan with Crimea, Donbass. That's what they wanted to do with Kiev. That's what they seemingly are trying to do with cities under their control, where the civilian authorities, the mayor, the elected officials, who continue to try to keep their cities running for their citizens, all the while potentially looking for opportunities to not comply or resist. I think in one case I saw a video clip of a Ukrainian mayor being kidnapped off the streets in order to get him out of the picture, so to speak. These are not the actions of a nation just looking to deal with some peacekeeping efforts that's going to be over soon. And just about almost the entirety of Eastern Europe, as far as I am aware, as well as the rest of Europe, you could argue, is looking at what's going on in Ukraine with something a little bit stronger than concern, which is why multiple countries have made emergency applications to the EU and NATO, something that Russia was trying to avoid and has threatened war to prevent. So Russia seems to be all in on this. And a lot of people might be saying, well, these sanctions are too rough, these sanctions are too rough. Unfortunately, these sanctions, but more importantly, the responses of businesses pulling out of Russia, is just a natural human response of the people. With those businesses that have attempted to remain, those international conglomerates, potentially facing or have already faced protests. Russia is not that big of a market compared to the rest of the world. And it's not worth risk getting sanctions from its own government if they wanted to stay. So Russia seems to be all in on this. For what reason, I myself do not know. But it looks like it's going to be a lot longer than we think, and the risk of it widening. Well, if you didn't think that there was a risk of it blowing up further last week, by now, I don't really have much hope that this particular genie could be put back in the bottle. Right? And then there's always the bigger question, involved. Anyway, they're telling me I need to take a break. I'm rambling on for too long. When we come back, we continue this discussion and we'll get into one of the topics near and dear to my heart, and that is everything to do with the appointment of the Commissioner of Police. Stay tuned. You're watching Talking Point on WESN, the content capital.
Alexa, can you play my song, please?
Every day across Trinidad, Flow is connecting communities near and far. Our dedicated teams are always working to keep you connected to the world beyond your doorstep. Improving internet accessibility across Trinidad, one home at a time. At Flow, we work hard for you, so you work hard for your family on the largest high-speed network. Connecting you to more every day with Flow.
Change your fate! Start to win at life with $20,000 every month. Win $20,000 every month for 20 years with NLCB's newest game, Win for Life. 6 numbers from 28 plus the cash ball could make you win for life. You deserve a win. Play Win for Life today. Visit NLCBGames.com for details. Players must be 18 years and over. Please play responsibly.
Gift giving during a lockdown can still be hassle-free with a gift from FanZone with delivery options available nationwide. Visit and browse our Facebook and Instagram pages for all your official licensed merchandise and apparel and have it delivered to your door. Find us on Facebook and Instagram. FanZone, we've got you covered.
The best for your baby is at thebesttoys.com. From the best strollers, car seats, baby carriers, high chairs, booster seats, rockers, jumpers and bouncers, walkers, baby blankets, feeding accessories, bathtubs. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship McLean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 332-BABY. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
Burning questions, urgent topics. Welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN Content Capital.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit?
Yes.
What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive. It is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole. It's for all of us in public.
It may seem like the hardest thing to do right now, but we all need each other to wear a mask, wash our hands, watch our physical distance, and stay at home. We need you safe. Together we can make the difference. Together we can curb the spread of COVID-19. So let's be responsible in our actions. The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
Good morning once again. Welcome back to Talking Point. And as promised, joining us is our Tuesday contributor, former youth parliamentarian on the national as well as regional and I believe CARICOM level as well. We have Mr. Kemuel Pascal. Good morning, Kemuel.
Good morning, Sean. It's a pleasure to be here, and good morning to your viewers and listeners as well.
Camille, I have to apologize publicly to you last week. Unfortunately, ironically, your regular day was International Women's Day, so we had to what's the word? We unfortunately had to give precedence to the ladies of Talking Point. But this week, however, we're glad to have you once again, and it allows us to speak on a few topics potentially that we didn't get a chance to speak to you about last week. But before we get into that, there is something has come up today, and that is the comments of the former Commissioner Gary Griffith after the Prime Minister finally acknowledged that he was the government official. First of all, it's an acknowledgement that there was a government official, and then that the fact that he was the one who, well, I'm not sure if we are fully aware of what actually took place in the president's residence, but he intercepted or he met with Blissy Prasad before she handed the list. We believe that it instigated the withdrawal or potentially you could say maybe the president sending back. There is no legal term for us to use because it's not written in law that could happen, but happen it did. Now that has been revealed that the Prime Minister was the one who met with Blissy Prasad, Gary has decided to go on another round of media appearances, and you could argue he's gone on the offense. He has basically said that the Prime Minister is jealous, and he has also had statements to imply that the Minister of National Security at the time, Minister Stuart Young, was, well, how do I say this? Thin-skinned with regards to how their working relationship was, and basically accused the minister of running to the PM when Gary did something that the minister did not like and was not, tough enough to have a robust working relationship with then Commissioner Griffith. So first, just your general thoughts. What do you have to think with regards to what you've seen so far in the last couple of days, what the Prime Minister said, and now what the former Commissioner said?
Right. So we know where it came from is that it came from an Express report done by Rhea Tate via an interview with the Prime Minister, which took place sometime within the last week. My first thoughts is a matter of, so Gary would have known all these things, whatever he claims to know, and he would have just kept it to himself whilst being the Commissioner of Police, and it questions his integrity as an individual, because he spoke about a lot of different things. He spoke about Stuart Young. He still speaks about the FUL report and the government minister who would have asked him for assistance in getting FUL permits for a particular friend or whatever is the case. And the thing about it is that you would have known all these things whilst being the Commissioner of Police. And the saying is always true: the upholder is worse than the thief. And the thing about it is that you knew all these things and you just did nothing. So why must I, as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, now trust you to want to become the Commissioner of Police once again?
Well, two things. One, he has apparently tried to throw the FUL situation, throw the blame on other people, right? I can't remember exactly what it was that he was counterclaiming with regards to the FUL, but basically saying, well, look what happened when I left. The situation is worse off, and I put things in place to prevent corruption, and the weapons that I allowed to be legally owned were never used in any crime, what have you. But then there's also, I believe there's a report that instead of wanting to be commissioner, because I think maybe he sees the writing on the wall, he seems to be eyeing higher office, something that was speculated for a long time. There is one report, I believe, it could be from the Express, I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but there's one report, I believe, that either states that or alludes to that. So what do you make of this now, that he seems to be maybe upping his game, so to speak?
I think that has always been his eyes have always been on wanting to become something more than the Commissioner of Police. When he spoke on another television station this morning, he would have alluded to the fact that he wants to challenge the Prime Minister in his constituency, which is Diego Martin West, because he claimed that the Prime Minister hasn't been in his constituency in years, and he wants to show the Prime Minister how he should represent people and how a Prime Minister should represent a country. So I think his eyes have always been on that. To me, once a politician, always a politician. We know the background of Gary Griffith. He came from being the advisor to the former Prime Minister, and then he would have become the Minister of National Security during the period of 2010 to 2015. So he still has it within him. That's what he has always been eyeing.
I think it's interesting that you said that once a politician, always a politician. We look at military men and we think, ooh, they're war fighters, ooh, they're protectors. But in other militaries, just like in any office space or any job where the individuals will be jockeying for promotion, right? In defense forces, you have internal politics for all intents and purposes, ironically, office politics, just like any other workplace. So, I do have to wonder how true is your statement that not only has he been a politician, but in some ways he's always been a politician. It's just that Defense Force, National Security has been his platform or niche. But sorry, it was not a newspaper article. I believe it was a title of a video online. But Gary Griffith, do you think he's claimed that his popularity was almost twice that of the Prime Minister? He was in the high 80s, and he said that the PM is half that, or maybe in the 50s, right? I would not expect the Prime Minister to be under 50%, but who knows? Do you think that this popularity, because it seems as though all of the public polls that we have seen alludes to this, so we don't have anything to contradict this on the same level of information. Do you think that it could actually work for him, that he could potentially ride that into public office? I'm not even reaching the Prime Minister's chair yet, but to contest the Prime Minister's seat, because, he's political leader for a reason. He's popular enough for the country. You would think that his own seat, even if he's absent most of the time, would be relatively safe.
I think to an extent, yes, he can garner some amount of support. There are people who support him and there are people who still support him, even to be the Commissioner of Police for Trinidad and Tobago. And there are some persons who have stated to him, go forward, go a step further, and potentially create a political party and put forth yourself. And which is he can do it because of the fact that he has gained some amount of popularity, and he has also lost some amount of popularity based on the fallout from this and other things which would have taken place during the time of him being the Commissioner of Police. But to go as far as to become the Prime Minister right now, I don't think he has all that. He has that large amount of popularity. As you mentioned, he did claim that the Prime Minister was jealous of him. Those were his words. His exact words, that the Prime Minister was jealous of him, hence the reason he wrote to the Police Service Commission and the whole fall that we have right now.
Well, consider this. On the former commissioner's side, on Gary's side, there is his alleged involvement with the firearm user's license fiasco, right? It's very hard to say that he's not involved. You would need to have concrete evidence to make that claim, unfortunately for him, whether rightfully or wrongfully. On the other hand, the situation with how the merit list was handled, well, that seems to be all on government and the Prime Minister. It's one of the issues that I have taken the Prime Minister to task. I took him to task about it just yesterday when he finally admitted that he was the one that met with Bliss Prasad. Because people might not realize this, but as I see it, ironically enough, while there are things I would criticize the Prime Minister for, I am happy that he's here. I'm happy that he sits in his seat because I look at our political leadership, our political class, and I don't see a lot of alternatives. There might be one or two, most of whom are untested. We don't know enough about them to say definitively. Some of them are very new to politics. Gary is not necessarily new, but I have to ask, they don't seem to have a lot of competition, at least not right now, for a popular leader. So in that regard, if the situation, because it puts the Prime Minister and Gary directly head to head, if the fiasco with the resignation of the Police Service Commissioner is enough to knock Dr. Keith Rowley down a peg so that Gary could overcome him in the polls, is there anybody else that could potentially challenge him in terms of popularity?
Within his party or outside?
Both. Both, I would say. I would ask, sorry.
I'm having a bit of challenge hearing you.
So I would ask, both parties, is there anybody who could rival Gary on an individual basis? Because we don't know necessarily for how long Dr. Keith Rowley will continue to act as political leader. I have heard in one case where he said he will come back, but he has also said that he is going to retire after this term. So if he's not here, who could potentially run against Gary to say, no, let's nip this in the bud?
You see, the thing was that I think whilst, as I mentioned before, whilst Gary Griffith does have some amount of popularity, I still don't think that he has that amount to take him that far, even if it's against Dr. Rowley or someone within the UNC or someone within the PNM. I don't think that he has that amount of popularity. There are people who like him for certain things, but then there are also people who are turned off of him because of certain things. But I still don't think that he has that amount. Doesn't matter the individual. I mean, there are people who he would definitely outrun, but I don't think he has that amount to contest or to go head to head with anyone right now at this point.
So let's go back to the original question. Well, not the original question, but his original or his last position. Do you think that he should be fighting harder to regain the post of Commissioner of Police? Or do you think that for all intents and purposes, it's out of his reach by now?
I think, well, obviously at this point, that's out of his reach. Even if the new Police Service Commission does a new merit list, sends it forward to the president, goes forward to Parliament, even if he makes the top of that list, he still have the Prime Minister and the government having to support him to become the Commissioner of Police. And even if the opposition comes out and say, well, they support him, it still wouldn't augur well for him in either way. So I think he knows that horse has bolted at this point, and so he kind of should be focusing on something else.
I mean, it then begs the question, why didn't the government just do that from the start? Just debate him in Parliament. He even brought it up. Debate him in Parliament and reject him in Parliament. So, I mean, I don't know if you have any thoughts about it. I think that's a sign that this thing is very political.
What I do think is that I listened to him on that particular point where he keeps saying, why would they go to Parliament, amend the law, just so that he would have been able to act. Well, that has since been thrown out, but amend the law for him to be able to act and do all these things just so that he can remain the Commissioner of Police, and then you have him now being thrown out. The thing about it is that I think the government knew that they no longer wanted him, and they would have gone as far as to do that. But then they realized that there's probably another loophole that they could have simply used to get rid of him, which is what they would have done with the whole thing that we have right now, which has brought us to this point now.
As we close, I have to ask, we still don't have a substantive Commissioner of Police, and we have many deputy commissioner positions unfilled. Months later, are you concerned, or are we holding out well enough?
I mean, I think at this point we're still holding out to see what the new Police Service Commission will do, because obviously they do have a role and they would have come in back in November. They would have taken their positions. So we're in March at this point. It's been 4 months since, so we will wait to see how things go. I would say by May, June, I expect to see something from the new Police Service Commission.
Whew, May, June. I was hoping to see something sooner, but something tells me you're probably right, and my hopes are probably wrong. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, I want to get into the economic situation, because as much as we said it's bad with the war, I think we're still learning how bad it could be. Stay tuned. This is Talking Point on WESN, your content capital. We'll be right back.
Burning questions, urgent topics. Welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN Content Capital.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit?
Yes.
What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive. It is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
A reminder from WESN. We urge you to protect yourself and others from the spread of COVID-19. Stay safe by taking some simple precautions. Clean your hands often. Use soap and water or an alcohol-based hand rub. Maintain a safe distance from anyone who is coughing or sneezing. Wear a mask. Don't touch your eyes, nose, or mouth. Cover your nose and mouth with your bent elbow or a tissue when you cough or sneeze. Stay at home. If you have a fever, cough, and difficulty breathing, seek medical attention. Following the above can help us all to help each other.
It was unthinkable that there would be such a war in the 21st century in Europe. And so in that sense, it is a watershed moment. I would say that there will be lasting consequences of this for the global economy. I mean, quite simply, if you look at the energy sector and energy trade, it's already clear that that will look very different in the post-war landscape. Countries will diversify away from Russia. You know, there's a push towards more renewables, so things will change on the trade front there. The second, for instance, was on payment systems. I think after the sanctions and so on, You could see big shifts in the payment systems. You could see an acceleration, for instance, of digital currencies, CBDCs. So there is a lot going on. And the concern that you might be held hostage to exports from another country, I think is a major concern that's coming out of this crisis.
Welcome back to Talking Points, and I am joined with our Tuesday contributor, Mr. Kemuel Pascal, former youth parliamentarian, and as we can see, the IMF, that I believe is the number 2 of the IMF's former chief economist. Now she is I can't remember her title, to be honest. She was recently promoted to her current position, Geeta Gopinath. She has warnings with regards to the situation continuing to have long-term effects on the world's economy. And we in TNT, Kemuel, we have been looking forward to trying to recover from COVID. We're seeing COVID numbers dwindle down and be reduced. But now we're in a situation where KFC is charging money for condiments. And as funny as it sounds and as ridiculous as it seems, and some people might say it's only $2, this is after a round of multiple rounds, you could argue, of food price increases with the expectation of more to come. So first of all, just with regards to what you've seen with the price of our food, I know milk has increased in price, and that's been a strain on my coffee drinking habits. What has it been like for you? What have you seen?
I think it has been a double whammy, to be quite honest. Even if you look at it from a government standpoint, the government has faced many economic challenges within their time from 2015 to 2020, and now onwards into 2022 with the Ukraine-Russia crisis. But I think what you have really and truly is an up on one end and a down on the other end, because yes, the price of gas will augur well for Trinidad and Tobago to some extent, but then you also have, with the price of gas rising, you also have a knock-on effect on food in particular, trade and shipping and all these different things. And so it's interesting. It's quite interesting for me to see how the government, or what they do to educate the citizenry as to why they are seeing an increase in their food price. I mean, in some cases it can be absorbed, but in a lot of cases it's really that they can't do anything, because we know what is exported out of the Black Sea area with Ukraine and Russia, which is wheat to a large extent, and even in Africa, they are speaking about the fact that there could be a famine because of the fact that there will be now a greater demand on U.S. wheat as opposed to wheat from Ukraine and that Russian area. So it's a matter of I think the government educating the citizenry to understand why food prices are rising, not just that the government isn't doing anything about it. That's kind of my take at this point.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the fact that we were somewhat under economic strain since 2015, because I believe it's something that people don't appreciate as much as they should. Yes, it's common practice for a government to blame the outgoing party, but regardless of what they were, what it was the People's Partnership fault, or what was just the circumstances of the time, the fact of the matter is revenue and cash flow was an issue for this government almost from the very beginning, if not the very beginning. I saw the signs of it. We heard about Gates. Gary was complaining he didn't have enough money. Ministries never have enough money. Now that we've reached this point, I have said what were the plans in the last budget, in case we had another external shock. But I do have to wonder if this is just one of those things that we were going to have to face. There was no amount of planning that we could have had. There's no amount of reserves we could have scraped together. And it's going to come down to what you just said. How does the government communicate with the population? And we've seen the government is not very good at that. Do you agree with what I'm saying there, that it's a dire situation that we're potentially facing?
Totally agree. If you look at the last budget, the Minister of Finance would have stated that they did not want to go the route of hard taxation on the population, because they would have done that in previous years, and they want to now give back to the population. And a lot of economists felt that the budget was fair in what the Minister of Finance would have done on the last occasion. But now, with the entire effect of this Ukraine-Russia crisis coming out of the pandemic, hoping to have hoping to have been buoyed somewhat by the fact that people were getting vaccinated, things were reopening, revenue was beginning to be generated a lot more than before. Now the government has to deal with this particular blow of the Ukraine-Russia crisis. So it'll be quite interesting to see how they deal with it going into September and September, October for budget 2023. It's going to be quite interesting to see how they deal with it, having regard to what they would have done on the last occasion. We'll wait to see if they have to send home persons or what they'd have to do. Then you also have the aspect of the fuel subsidy, and the Prime Minister would have spoken about it in the last conversation last week. So it's quite interesting. There are a lot of things to balance at this point. They would not have had to deal with that. They would not have seen that on the last occasion of the last budget. So it's quite interesting to see how they handle things going forward.
Well, a couple of those things. One is just the effort to diversify. I think at this point, most economists have been kept saying we need food security and so on and so on. Energy security, ironically, is also something that comes up in the long term that we have to start to be concerned about. But the government, as much as they pay lip service to that, we haven't really seen anything. Here's the interesting question, though, that diversification is always a long-term thing. The currency exchange rate, TNT's exchange rate, that could be allowed to go to 10-1. That's what everybody has been touting. It will probably go to, if allowed to go freely. There might be some gains with regards to exports and the tourism industry. It will make importing things, which we do a lot of, harder. What do you think about letting the currency rates, move up?
I mean, we've been over this since they came in. In fact, since in 2014, when oil prices began to drop, when there was a drop in oil prices, and then that particular government would have made a 7% tax cut. Well, not 7% tax, sorry. They would have made a 7% cut in the budgetary allocation towards all ministries. I don't know if you recall how far back we've been dealing with this issue.
Right.
And there would have been the suggestion to devalue the dollar. They would not have done it. The present government came in 2015, and the previous government have been suggesting to them to do that. Economists have been suggesting to them that they should do that. However, they haven't done that. The Minister of Finance has in fact praised himself and his government for their handling of the Forex issue, speaking about the fact that they have import cover to cover 7 months at one point, 8 months at one point. I don't know how many months they have, how many months of import cover they have at this point. But it'll be interesting to note that we're approaching April. Usually they have the mid-year review sometime about April, May. I don't know if they'll do any this year, but I think they should, owing to what we are in right now. And on that particular issue of the value of the dollar, I don't think that the government will ever go that route, because they have continuously stated that they have been managing quite well with the current rate.
Well, I mean, we have been managing, but I think what you said there about the budget, about the last budget review, that was then, before we could have foreseen all of what would happen now. So the circumstances have completely changed, and it'll be interesting to see if the government will change their tune as well, because I think you will agree with this. We can't continue just plodding along like we always do. Right? Is that fair to say? There's too many shocks to the system. However, I'm sorry, we are more or less out of time. We have to break for news on the hour. But thank you once again for joining me, Kemuel. It's always a pleasure to talk to an old classmate of mine. Hopefully, your studies are going better than mine. But thanks for being here and having a conversation with me today.
Thank you very much for having me, and have a great day and a great week ahead to your viewers and listeners, and to you as well.
All right, Kemuel. Thanks a lot. Folks, that's it there. We will, of course, return after our news on the hour. so we could have our call-in segment where we could hear your concerns. You could speak about anything that you would like to. It doesn't have to be about the topics that we spoke about on today. However, we have WSN's news on the hour. Stay tuned, and when you return, we'll be right back with more talking points.
Seven is out. All day is in. WESN News on the hour.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
In this season, we talk more about health, wellness, and everything in between. I am so excited to share with you everything about health and wellness so that you can design the life that you've always dreamed of. Join me here on What's Up Doc.
What's Up Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit? Yes. What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, is for all of us in public.
Burning questions, urgent topics, welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN Content Capital.
If you live with someone who's tested positive for COVID-19 and has to self-isolate at home, take care of them from a distance and reduce their movement around the house. Give them space, a designated space, and open those windows. If you have to be in contact, mask up, both of you. If you work, stay home from work and don't go out. Not even to the grocery or pharmacy. And remember, no visitors allowed. Limit the contact to limit the spread.
The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Talking Point. This is this time when you, the viewer, will be able to call in and say your piece. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me what I got wrong. Tell me what opinions are incorrect or baseless, where my evidence is lacking, or where you agree. You know, that could happen too. Or we would love if you have any good news, anything positive happening in the country that you'd like to highlight. Maybe something from the public sector that's going right. Ironically, of course, news generally tends to be where things have gone wrong. So call in. We're opening up the phone lines now. The number's on the screen, 623-9376, 622-9338. Call in. Tell us what you have to say. We have a call from Diego Martin. Good morning, caller.
Hi, Sean, and everyone else. Yeah, thanks. Good morning. Sean, I just want to add to what you've said about the war. It is Mariupol that's under siege, almost 1,400 dead, and yes, no food and water. And it is a humanitarian crisis because of the rapidity of these refugees. I mean, 2.8 million, even the UNHCR, they've never seen that much in only 3 weeks. Tomorrow will be 3 weeks. So there's just that. And about Keith Rowley, whether he's pretending it was obvious that he intervened or not, I think it's a lie by omission, if not admission. He's masterful at lies and deceit. Yesterday, Keaton gave his favorite quote, but mine is this: there's nothing to clarify because it was clarified from day one. It was so simple and straightforward. But because you're predisposed not to believe, because in this country people are so accustomed to being lied to, when you tell them the truth as I've been telling you, you have a little difficulty believing it. And with Gary's interview too, the counterpoint that you tried to remember just now with the FULs was when he said, supposing someone in high office asks you either here in Trinidad or in Tobago to grant someone a license and they qualify, then he did his checks and it would be authorized. But I just want to say this with Keith Rowley is really nonsense, and he just has to please his apologists, as we clearly see every day, and that's that. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, caller. One thing, though, I will say this with regards to the refugees. As much as the conflict might be around 3 weeks, I think a good bulk of the amount of people fleeing, at least, 1 million of them or so, maybe close to 2 million out of the 2.7, 2.8, might have been within the last week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. Like, the bulk of them were not a steady stream from the beginning. It accelerated as the war accelerated. So the speed of which the crisis continued, I think, is even more shocking and alarming. So, interesting enough, we did have one individual from TNT looking to go to Ukraine to defend it. I'm not entirely sure if he has made his way there yet. That is, of course, Mr. Brian Stone, where he indicated that he wanted to go, even with the protests of his own wife with regards to him going. And it's an interesting ethical dilemma you could ask. Should individuals go? Should individuals from Trinidad go? Will there be any fallout from individuals from Trinidad going? One guy from Trinidad, will we even warrant any fallout? What would it look like? But more importantly, what happens if on the wider diplomatic scale, there comes a time where we could potentially contribute to the debate? What would we want to say as a nation? Now, granted, everybody has more or less said what they should say. Those that have ties with Russia try to be as neutral as possible, or they decided to either throw their hat in the ring to support Russia or pull back a bit from their usual stance. The rest of the world, if we have to support whoever we diplomatically have to support for whatever trade reasons, business reasons, diplomatic reasons. But what happens if there's an opportunity to take a stand? Do we expect our government to take a hard stand? Do we potentially know what the price of that stand would be? Are we willing to pay that price? The economic turmoil that might come with it. The risks of being associated with promoting a wider conflict. And at the end of the day, we might think of ourselves as isolated, but the pandemic came here. And the inflation is coming here. And further shocks to the nation are trickling down from Europe to here. The violence might not reach here, but the fallout possibly can. So I have to ask, are we prepared to make a moral stand? Do we believe in the morality of the Ukrainians defending themselves? Or do we just want to not get involved? Sometimes it's not wrong to put your head in the sand. It all depends, because there's a price to pay either way you go. We have a call on the line from Shogunus. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Morning, Professor.
I must agree with your previous caller who talking about we so accustomed to hearing lies. We believe anything. And if you remember, I think the Bible says, the guilty fleeth where no man pursueth. And this, listening to the program this morning, I think the problem with the Prime Minister's visit to the Parliament is such a case. He could have gone to see the President in his normal business. He could have seen the person who put in the report for the Commissioner of Police and asked them quite innocently, what about my report that I sent to you on the Police Commission? They said, oh, I forget all about that. And they say, I just put in the recommendation. I better go and withdraw it. If that happened, nothing wrong. Yes, you document it. And when people ask you a question, you tell them what happened.
So, would you say then that...
questions as you alone today.
Well, I was not going to ask. So would you say that his lack of transparency, because it's weird, right? There's nothing to hide, yet...
No, I agree.
Yet he hid something. We just don't know exactly what it is.
No. All I am saying there is a scenario which can be proper, but we're so accustomed to hiding.
Yes.
That we are not
yes. That it would be ironic, right? Your statement implies that he might have hid something that he didn't even necessarily need to hide.
Of course. There's nothing, if that I say is true,
yes,
there's nothing to hide.
Well, okay, I'll have to thank you right there, but we do have another caller. But thank you for that. Thank you for that contribution. Good morning, caller from Tobago.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
Sean, how are you doing this morning?
I'm going okay.
All right. My contribution on the Ukrainian matter this morning, we're hearing a lot of news coming out of there, a lot of, calamity and so forth, and of course, naturally, anti-Russian sentiments are taking place around the world. Conveniently, what I'm not hearing is how the stage was set for Russia's response now, which is actually viewed as a response in Ukraine to the United States, NATO, and EU attempting to woo Ukraine into NATO and thus give the West a foothold in Russia's backyard. And just as the United States vehemently opposes any foreign superpower coming into its backyard through the Monroe Doctrine, they violently responded to that. Grenada is an example, and still there, what they're doing in Cuba or to Cuba because of Russians' influence there is also an example. So we're not hearing that. We're not hearing what they did to set this stage. We're hearing what Russia's doing now. And yes, it's wrong. It's violent. People are dying. But how did we get here? And I think that has to be considered also in our conversation.
Well, I'll respond mostly off air, but I will say this about Grenada. From what I understand, certain Eastern Caribbean leaders invited the U.S. to intervene in Grenada, so they did not do so unilaterally. Now, with regards to the specifics on the politics, I can't speak to it, but that was, I've looked it up as well, but that was confirmed to be by my senior colleague, Mr. Andy Johnson, who does AM Prime, who has been a journalist in the industry
And
for many years.
You're absolutely right in terms of the U.S. being invited in.
Mm-hmm.
That is usually the case. Somehow the United States
but
invited in.
When you look at Grenada specifically,
Mm-hmm.
the revolutionary forces, some might think that they had the will of the people, but the revolutionary forces, their successors, did not necessarily or do not necessarily enjoy any amount of popularity. So that was one case. I think one of the interesting things, Kola, is that we do have to look at democratic government policies. We do have to look at it in silos because it's different elected officials over time. The interesting thing with Russia is that a lot of what Russia has done in Eastern Europe over the last 10 to 20 years, well, that was formulated by Putin. He's been in charge of Russia for over a decade now, maybe even significantly more so. I guess I'll finish responding.
But it's really no different than what the United States and England has done throughout the Caribbean and Africa, enslaving Africans and so forth. There's
Right,
really no difference there.
but again,
Russia just
a lot of
turned
these
their
things
attention towards Europe.
Right, but a lot of these things have different people involved. So it's a slippery slope because if you want to say, well, America, because look at what they did in the last 200 years, the problem with that is, are we going to now have to deal with the consequences or the sins of what our countrymen have done for the last 200 years? The sins of our family member, not just the father, but the father, the brother, the grandfather, the mother, do they all have to be born on the son? Now, with regards to Russia, a lot of my personal issues are centered around Putin and what Putin has done and controlled, which is why I give that a different type of review. The thing with regards to Ukraine and NATO ultimately boils down to this. I think Ukraine wanted to be in NATO because of the threat of Russia, and there was no formal agreement between Russia and the United States. Russia says they had an informal agreement with the United States. The problem is that implies that the United States could impose its will by making a unilateral deal or a bilateral deal with Russia, a unilateral decision on what Ukraine and the European Union can or cannot do with its own defense. So if Europe and NATO wanted Ukraine and Ukraine wanted NATO, Russia can't even claim that they made a deal with either NATO or the EU or with any European countries. They're saying we made a deal with the United States. The United States does not have the authority to tell Ukraine, well, no, I said you can't be in NATO. And this is something that has been boiling over for years now. And we have seen that Russia has been an aggressor to Ukraine. So I can't fault Ukraine for applying to the EU, which is what they did, as well as to NATO. So I understand your point. I understand your point because you're poking the bear. But the flip side is the bear is unfortunately unreasonable, and we might have ended up here regardless of what was done. We have another caller from Digoma.
It's not like the bear did not want to join NATO and was denied entrance into NATO.
Mm-hmm.
But I respect your point. Thank you very much, George. A very wonderful conversation. Have a great day.
I mean, yes, I think, caller, just to wrap it up, I think it's a situation where I believe the aggression was going to happen regardless, because we've heard a lot of other excuses coming out from Vladimir Putin's mouth himself, some of which are ridiculous. But yes, we do always have to take things with a grain of salt and try to look at the other side and always keep them in mind, because who knows what will be revealed later on. We have a caller from Diego Martin.
Good morning, Mr. Small.
Good morning.
I hope everything is well with Ethan.
I think so. I think he's generally okay. He didn't seem in too much distress this morning when
Okay, all right. Well, I just want to make a quick comment. I think the reason why the Prime Minister came out and made that his comment concerning the Gary Griffiths fiasco business is that because I think there's something in the court pertaining to the former commission, Mr. Prasad. And I think that is coming up soon. And the truth will have to come out then. So I believe that is one of the reasons why he probably made that announcement to try and, protect or something or the other. But as far as that is concerned, I mean, if Gary goes up, down, in anywhere in the Camarania, he has my vote. But that. So I wish him all the best and hope that everything goes well with him. And you have a good day and say my very good morning to Keaton as well. And thank you all.
Thank you, caller. Well, one thing though, I believe that the former commissioner, he dropped his lawsuits against the commission. So I'm not too sure if Blissy Prasad is going to have to face anything personally. The liability in these sorts of things, usually it would have to be the office. You would need to prove a certain amount of personal negligence in order to involve them directly. I'm not a lawyer, so I could be saying complete nonsense. But I'm not sure, I don't think there's any more legal actions to be heard on the matter from the former commissioner's side. And I think whatever legal proceedings were to be heard were heard with regards, and that was more with regards to what they adjusted to allow for the acting commissioner of police. Because remember, he was technically declared, I guess you could say, as acting commissioner of police for a time, and then the court said, no, this cannot happen. And even before that, there was a dispute between the former commissioner and the then new Minister of National Security, relatively speaking, Fitzgerald Hines, where they got into a public spat with regards to who was acting as commissioner. It took the courts to more or less settle the matter. But with regards to the Police Service Commission, we haven't really heard, we don't even have an explanation exactly what happened, because ultimately, Blissy Prasad essentially seemed to have gone one way with regards to her opinions, her findings, her reasoning, her logic, and her conclusions. And a significant amount of the Service Commission seemed to have gone the other way, disagreed with what she did, how she did it. Everybody resigned, essentially. And we are now in, I don't know, we should have had a new appointed commissioner since last July, August, probably even as early as June. And now we're in March. We're closing in on a year, and we technically don't have a police commissioner, and we have one guy that's supposed to hold down the leadership function of the entire TTPS. I don't know how that's supposed to really work. He has to do his job, somebody else's job, and the commissioner's job. We have a caller from Maraval. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Michael Small.
Good morning, sir.
I want to give you a question one of these days regarding sports. Anyway, what I call to remind people, 4 years ago when we had the Venezuelan refugees coming into Trinidad, a lot of the neighboring countries said that Rowley should join them and denounce Maduro. Rowley's remark was very simple. As far as they're concerned, that is the elected government, regardless of how they got elected. The same way you have to say Russia is Putin, regardless of how he got elected.
Right.
What is amazing is I have traveled the world. I have never been to Cuba or anywhere and seen anything ever that I could buy that's made in Russia. Russia supplies energy. That's it. And the great thing that nobody's talking about, all of a sudden, Venezuela now had a very strong delegation from the United States a week ago concerning buying their crude oil. And Rowley now, if it's one good thing he did, is he refused to say that Maduro is this and that. We have nothing to do with, because our boundary with that set of oil is between us and Venezuela. And the last thing, Michael, is what I want people to remember. And it is very important that Venezuela is the biggest hope Trinidad have of foreign investors coming back now and revamping our refinery and refining oil. Because the Venezuelan refinery in Maracaibo, where my cousins and all them live, is just like nothing. So we have to think of that. Have a good day.
That's an interesting point there, caller. That's an interesting point. I will say this, though. It's very convenient. The United States is willing to forgive Maduro. Now, to be fair, you haven't really heard much out of Venezuela for the last couple of years. I think they probably hit rock bottom. And fortunately, they did not sink any further. How, I do not necessarily understand. But we haven't heard anything necessarily too bad from Maduro. Maybe that helps mend fences. The thing is, though, Venezuela was looking at Russia as an ally. So, to some extent, now, granted, if they're willing to drop Russia as an ally and reintegrate with the Western world so that we could now do business with them, that would be good for us. But that's a lot of complicated international relations there that I don't even want to begin to try to guess at, because there's a lot that we don't know on that level. There'll be some things I will reveal over time, but I think it's an interesting point where, yes, the refinery is in such a bad position. Now, so much time has gone with it not functioning. Who knows what the operational maintenance cost is going to be. But with regards to the debt that the refinery was used essentially as collateral in order to wind up Petrogen, maybe that might be the one area that I do have to wonder, was that the best way to basically close Petrogen down? To use the refinery as collateral and a loan in order to pay severance packages? I mean, if you're going to be harsh, and there's a part of me that wants to be harsh, you could say how many of those employees deserved high severance packages for a failing company. But really and truly what we would have need to make that statement is more transparency with regards to the issues at Petrogen. As our caller from Sugar Honesty Professor has said repeatedly, the issue was the gas to liquids plant at the time, increasing the costs of Petrogen and reducing the profits. So, will Venezuela be able to help in that specific area? Maybe, maybe not. Overall, though, we're looking at the possibilities. There's probably some that I could not even speculate about. I wouldn't even know. Who knows what it's going to be like? Maybe this could be one way out. But again, are we going to just sit on the oil and gas money, spend it potentially unwisely, not invest it for long-term diversification and investments, and then get caught right back in this situation in the next 5 to 10 years? I think that ultimately might be the fear of many an economist in the country, and many a citizen. I'm hearing the phone call, but if you haven't realized, we're 2 minutes, the half an hour mark, so we can't take any more calls. I'd like to thank all of the callers today, as well as, once again, our Tuesday contributor, Camille Pascal, for joining me on the conversation this morning. It was an interesting morning, and I think we do need to not allow ourselves to become complacent and to just kind of let certain topics pass us by. I was actually going to argue today, I was going to ask, did we let the discussion on the merit list or the lack thereof of an appointment of Commissioner of Police, did we let that conversation die? Now there's a new round, the saga has continued once again, but we can't afford to let these things be forgotten. Because when they're forgotten, well, we tend to repeat the same mistakes. We're only human. We repeat the same mistakes from the 1980s. Oil is back. Let's go oil. But what about food security? How many more times are we going to have to face the same challenges on a recurring decimal before we actually figure out a proper solution, as opposed to just saying, well, this is a cycle and things will come back to how it was before? Eventually, the oil is going to run out. And as I said before, energy security, we're going to have to worry about that. We already have to buy the fuel for our cars. Pretty soon, we're going to have to buy gas for our plants. We won't be able to sell gas to any foreign exchange to buy it. What are we going to do then? Are we ready for that phase of our country's existence? I don't think so. Maybe we need to demand more from our political class. And that means getting more involved in the politics of your local constituency, of your party, of your country. Folks, COVID, unfortunately, is not completely gone, so please stay safe. Watch all the public health regulations. This might come back again, so if you could, consider getting vaccinated. My name is Sean Michael Small. This is WSN's Talking Point. We will see you tomorrow, but for now, we're out.